So hi everyone, my name is Jenny. I'm from With Democracy. We're a grassroots Israeli British community supporting the pro-democracy movement in Israel, and we're objecting Netanyahu and his far-right government and advocating for democracy for all. At the moment, we're also vocal about our support for an immediate hostage deal and ending the war. And if you're not following us already, please do so. So we know that the events of 7th October have deeply affected Israelis and Jewish communities around the world. For some, or perhaps too many, this has led to a shift to the right, or as they say in Hebrew, הם התפכחו. In Israel, some have even gone so far as to declare that the Israeli left is essentially dead. In the UK, many who identify as left-wing have found themselves conflicted and sometimes ostracized by the global left. The call for unity and the together we will win, ביחד ננצח, has often meant that people feel pressured to remain silent about their true feelings regarding Israel's conduct in the war. We're expected to avoid criticizing the Israeli government for fear that it only serves the anti-Semites. Often, those who do voice their opinions and talk about peace and diplomatic solutions are called naive in the best case and Hamas collaborators in the worst case. So being Israeli or Jewish left-wing can be a rather lonely experience these days, which is why it's so heartening to see so many people registering for the Zoom session. Sorry, can I ask everyone to be on mute? Because that's a bit odd. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay. So it was really good to see so many people registering for this Zoom session and joining us tonight. And we're here to remind you that you're not alone and to create a space for a discussion about the experience of being an Israeli and Jewish left-wing individual in the UK. We'll also talk about how we can support each other, make a difference while staying true to our beliefs and our values, and support those who are working for change in Israel. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. So this session will last about 1 hour. We'll start with a panel and then we'll open to discussion to your questions. Please stay on mute during the first part and feel free to write your questions in the chat that I will be monitoring. And I'm very happy to introduce our panelists. So Magen Inon is a London-based father of 3 and an educator with a PhD in the philosophy of education. He has worked to cultivate liberal values and leadership skills with students, military officers, young adults, and inmates. Since the murder of his parents in the Hamas attack on 7th October, Magen has become a leading voice for peace between Israelis and Palestinians within international media, local communities, and the political elite. We also have with us Rabbi Leah Munstein. She's one of the senior rabbis of the Ark Synagogue and PLS. She's the immediate past chair of Artzeinu, the umbrella organization of Reform and Progressive Religious Zionists. Leah works to represent the interests of Reform and liberal Jews around the world within the governing bodies of the Israel's national institutions. She's also a former member of the executive of the Jewish Agency, a strong supporter of the World Jewry, and she's the current chair of the European Union for Progressive Judaism. Omer Shechter currently stands out as the sole representative for Israel for the prestigious Chevening Scholarship in London. He has been involved in Meretz since he was 13 and has been a city council member in Rosh Hashanah with roles including deputy mayor and head of education. He was elected to the recent national list in the 9th place and is currently a member of the party's national board. Finally, the panel will be led by Matan Rosenstrauch, who is an Israeli peace activist and a Hebrew teacher living in London. Matan is an organizer of Meretz UK and a consultant for the Balfour Project, where he started the Peace Advocacy Fellowship for postgraduate students working on advocacy and education-themed projects. In the past, he coordinated the SISO Diaspora Israeli Partnership to ending the occupation, and he also helped establish the Jewish Democratic Initiative in South Africa. So Magen, Leah, and Omer, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and Matan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Great. So it is very heartening to see so many people coming at this point of time. I will just say a word, a short sentence about Meretz UK. This is a joint event of We Democracy and Meretz UK. Meretz UK supports, obviously, is representative of the political party Meretz in Israel, who now, as you might probably know, joined with Labour to Hademokratim, and we promote progressive values such as LGBT rights, religious freedom, and most importantly, we support the two-state solution and an end to the occupation, which we believe that is the core issue which will determine the future of both peoples on this land. We want to have 2 rounds of questions. So if each of the panelists can keep each answer for about 5 minutes, so then we can open and have like conversation with everyone who wants. So I think I will start with Magen. My question, the first question for all panelists is, how has the aftermath of October the 7th and the war in Gaza affected you personally, your work, and your community?
Very short question. And I'll keep it brief because we have quite a busy panel and we want to leave some room for questions. So basically, for me, it was a complete change in how my day-to-day looks like. Since the murder of my parents on October 7th, and a few days after, me and my siblings made the decision that we want to send out a universal message and be quite vocal about it. And I've been, so you might hear my daughter in the background. Basically, I've used any platform we have in order to push that message that we're not seeking revenge and that the true legacy of my parents is peace. And we've been active in any way we can. So I'm privileged to be here in London, and I have, sadly, in Israel, there are many people who were experienced the tragedy on October 7th and are quite, they share our values and our worldview. So it's quite, not that the media is looking for those voices, but if someone is looking for a lefty voice in Israel that was, their life were affected on October 7th, it's relatively easy to find. Here in London, I'm quite unique in that sense. And so I had the opportunity to speak to the media in synagogues, with politicians, just this Sunday at the Liberal Democrats conference, and next week at the Labor conference. And I'm happy to answer more about that, but that's the most significant change in my day-to-day. There's a more emotional and psychological stuff that I can also get into if people are interested, maybe later.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can hear now from Omer. So Omer, you have been very involved with Israeli politics and specifically with Meretz, but you, as many Israelis living in the UK, has experienced it from outside. So you have also a different perspective, but also feel free to share about about also your experience in Rosh Hashanah and how you got people involved in Meretz who are not necessarily, Meretz voters, if you can include that maybe.
Yeah. So first of all, Matan, thank you for having me. It's great to being here. And thank Lawrence, Jenny, Gal, all the partners from We Democracy and Meretz UK I think it's a really important event, not because I'm a participant here, but actually, I think it's a important subject to bring into people's awareness, and I think it's important for us as Jewish and Israeli to talk about it. And I think, first of all, maybe a short disclosure. It is my last month in the UK. I'll be back very soon to Israel next month, and I'll be back to my previous position and head of public policy at the Department of Parliamentary Relations in the Histadrut. However, needless to say, I will represent today just my personal view. So maybe I'll start with very shortly my experience over the last year has been experience of student at LSE. I studied urban planning. I arrived in the UK last September, and I think that shortly after the program started, after October 7th, we were all kind of paralyzed for the at least a month. I'm talking about the Israeli and the Jewish student. We couldn't focus. I personally couldn't focus my studies. I thought maybe going back to Israel and to volunteer or something that I would be able to do. And I think after things have been stabilized a bit, so we kind of created the depression, the distress. We kind of managed to utilize it into an action, as many others, I think, here, as at least from what I've been, from what I noticed. So I think overall the experience was complex being here. On the one hand, on October the 7th, even the same day, I remember that we noticed posts on social media that outspokenly supported the Hamas massacre. So, for example, one senior faculty member posted that decolonization is not a metaphor. No, I'm talking about October 7th, the same day, and calling from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, like posting it at the same day, like even before we comprehend the full scale of this horror. So when we posted, for example, hostages posters, we felt somehow uncomfortable, not just because they were torn down pretty quickly, but also because we often experience threats or direct threats or hate speech. And I think many of us have heard about such occasions. However, I do think that some people joined this kind of movement, anti-Israeli movement, out of virtue signaling, and I don't think it was like a deep and profound beliefs that they were lying on. I must say that on the other hand, I was fortunate to be able to surround myself with a supportive circle of friends and partners. We created an action group of Jewish students and faculties. It was mainly to feel a sense of supportive community in these times of anxiety and distress. But some of us also took it into action, as I mentioned before. So I and two other friends, for example, we went to the British Parliament. We met with MPs and advocated for some measures regarding Jewish students on campuses to tackle and to fight anti-Semitism and hate speech on campuses, and to stand behind university administration that in order to protect Jewish students. And we try to create real structure for a constructive dialogue, also between students in campus and between Jewish and Palestinian students, to show also that I think for many students, I felt like the word Israel was is equal to Netanyahu, and I think to show the complexity of the Israeli society, which many I think are not aware of. And just to maybe to like last word, I as I mentioned, I will be back to Israel soon, and I am looking forward to join and contribute as much as I can to the efforts against this government, and I think as part of even it sounds a bit cliche, but like a Zionist mission for me. So I'm looking forward into it.
Thank you for sharing this, Omer. I think it's the core issue that we faced as a left is how to address those justifications of massacre on one hand, but at the same time keeping our beliefs that the occupation should not happen, and how to find our space, especially at those times, and also how do people from the left, who sometimes maybe of friends who have lost friendships, and people just because they're Jewish or Israeli, they just stopped talking to them, and this is quite often. So this is also a very a strong issue that I think we need to address as well. So maybe we can also refer to these experiences in the next round. And now to Rabbi Leah, thank you very much for being here. It's important to have a rabbi who also has a constituency and work within the Jewish Zionist world, and have such a big working with so many people, so many communities. I think for me personally, working with teaching Hebrew or being in touch with the Jewish community in the UK, I have seen some shifts, like since when the two-state solution has become a bad word to use. I often find myself that this is a shift that has happened. Is this something that you encounter as well? And more generally, how has you personally, your work in your community has shifted since?
Thank you so much. I will definitely comment on that. I think I just want to start by saying, so I was on sabbatical when October the 7th happened from my congregational job. I actually had been in Israel for 3.5 months, just until like 3 weeks before October the 7th. So I have to say, when October the 7th hit, for me, I was already quite at a low point. I had gone through the months of the pro-democracy demonstrations that were, on one hand, exhilarating, like walking into Jerusalem with thousands of people was exhilarating. At the same time, it was utterly devastating, that it was clear the government was set on ignoring the hundreds of thousands of people that were crying out for democracy. I never really, it wasn't really until that moment that I ever had moments like having to call my synagogue chair to say, I think I could potentially be arrested and be kicked out of Israel today. Because I might cause a little bit of a scene if you Google my name and the Jewish Agency meeting, you will see that I caused quite a scene with Simcha Rotman speaking at the Jewish Agency meetings. They did not arrest me, unfortunately, I guess. But it was the only time I ever memorized the number of a lawyer in case I needed it. So I guess I was already feeling kind of low and utterly disappointed in the government. At the same time, I still felt deeply committed to the Israeli people, to the vision of Israel being a state where Jewish people could practice sovereignty and show that we could do it well and that we wouldn't become fascists. At the moment, this seems to be hanging in the balance, but maybe we can still turn it around. We definitely can't turn it around if people like us stop engaging in it. So I remain committed to that. So initially, of course, there was the shock, there was the trauma, there was the feeling of actual loss of friends who died. So there was having to hold people in their bereavement. As a synagogue rabbi, holding parents whose kids were called up into the army, who were waiting to go into Gaza. One of our congregants was injured in Gaza. So there was that aspect. I guess for my work, and I was holding people doing pastoral work for the progressive Jewish community, as in politically progressive as well. We were utterly bereft because we felt abandoned by our progressive friends. We felt abandoned by our interfaith partners when we were still grieving, deeply grieving, and like in that month of being frozen, like what Omer said, where we couldn't really think, right? The progressive left were demonstrating against us already. Like they didn't need to, gather themselves. What has it been like since? I think the situation has brought about a deep sense of uncertainty for the Jewish community. There's a deep sense of rising anti-Semitism, even if in practice most of our members don't experience it. It's a fear. I mean, it's a fear that probably all of us share at some point walking through London or anywhere in the world these days. And I think that does lead, at least initially, to this rightward shift, to this disappointment, to a thought that two states will never be possible. How could you make peace with these people? I think there's a shift back. I think as we've recovered from the shock, I think we're seeing much more nuance. And I think one of the things for me that is really the most important in my role as a rabbi in congregation is being able to foster nuanced conversations, raising awareness of Israelis who share our voices and our values, right? Many people, that those are not the voices that get amplified in the media in general. Really to provide a space for this nuance.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing this. So what I want you now to do is maybe try to speak about the challenges that you faced as being a lefty Jew or Israeli these days. How did you manage to stick to your values in face of everything that's happened? The justification of Hamas massacre that you found, the killing of so many innocents in Gaza, things that are very, very difficult. How did you contain all of that? So what were your challenges, and have you come up with some ideas how to overcome them? Maybe starting with Magen.
Okay, thank you. I'll start from overcoming the challenges. And sorry, I'm tired. I might be even more direct than usual. So a couple of things. One, we don't have the privilege to be offended. I can, write a long list of reasons why I should be offended by someone shouting from the river to the sea, or someone carrying a kafia, or a Jewish person telling me that I'm, an Arab lover, or that I'm naive. There's a reason for me to be offended from each and every person I speak to. This is not going to lead us anywhere. I don't think we have the privilege to be offended. The point we have to be focused on is that our goal is changing reality. It's not about winning the argument. It's not about sounding clever. It's not about being right. We want to change reality. That's the focus. Now, in order to change reality, there's a few things we need to do. And one of them is to partner up with people that are complete assholes. And something that I met with many hostage families, and we've discussed that. ultimately the hostage deal is going to be with Hamas. They are the biggest assholes we can. They are in the Middle East, but we need to somehow find a way to work together with them if we want to see the hostages back home. And so this issue of, the pro-Palestinian camp is sometimes not saying the right thing with the right nuance. They don't understand the context. Okay, so what? If I can partner with anyone there on the things that I think are important and we can change reality, they are partners. And I think similarly with anyone else, including the Israeli right, anyone who's a partner, we can work with. And I think if we're offended and we start looking for reasons of why I shouldn't partner up with some people, then we just we lose the chance to change reality. So that's how we overcome it. And the challenges, I think I've already discussed. There are many challenges, but we have to stay focused and tell ourselves and others our goal is to change reality. In the short term, it means to stop the war and get the hostages back. And in the long term, it means a diplomatic process and peace. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. And I wish the Israeli left would just say that. I think they're being, I don't know, they're trying to cater for the audience that would never vote for them. But at least here in the UK, we can convince our political partners to say those things. And I hope that in the short term, it would also, many Israelis would join that. And I can talk later about להתפכח, about what it means to see the future, to sober up. After 20 years of no diplomatic process and more violence, then what does it mean to sober up?
Yeah. And we're speaking, thank you so much. And we're speaking about how we shifted with all these challenges. We can also see in the Israeli society how more and more people in the beginning speaking about the ceasefire was a taboo. Now, so many people in the streets are for it. So there's also a big shift, in the Israeli society, understanding that this war is not necessarily promoting our security, let alone the return of the hostages. Over to you. Let's continue with Rabbi Leah.
So I think I want to echo a lot of the things that Magen said. I think for me, first of all, I think I try and I encourage this when I talk about having nuanced conversations, to always start from a place of compassion when you hear people. And then also to explain how you see things. So one of the techniques that I teach people is that instead of, if something offends you, instead of like starting to shout at the other person, start by saying, when you just said so-and-so, what I heard was, right? Because often that's actually not what the other person tried to say to us. They had something quite different in mind, but what we heard was, gender-based violence didn't really happen or whatever. So I think starting from a place of compassion, in a sense, I have the privilege. I'm a rabbi. I can say I'm not a politician. In the end, I'm a rabbi. What is my job as a rabbi? My job as a rabbi is to present a vision of a better world, whether we think we can achieve it right now or not, right? It's about holding on to that vision, holding on to those values and really being clear about the values. So being able to say really clearly when our own people go against those values, being able to say, this is a stain on my side of the story. If we think about, we can give many examples of the last few months where I feel that quite deeply. And at the same time, I think it is important sometimes to do a bit of tochecha when we're speaking with people and to be able to say, actually, when you say that, you know, that's really not living up to the values that you're holding up right now. So I think the way we overcome it is by continuing to believe that we can change the world. And that we need to do that. Changing the world doesn't happen with all the people who already think the world should be as you think it is, because otherwise the world would be that world. So we just have to keep working. We have to keep forgetting sometimes what some of these people are saying or doing. Doesn't mean we have to be best friends with everyone, right? Sometimes you don't have to be friends with someone to be able to say, I need to sit at a table and negotiate some sort of solution here. And I hope that if we can open ourselves up to that, we can all do our part to seeing a shift to a more positive way forward.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Leah. Omer, what do you see the challenges of the Israeli left to be these days, and how do you suggest to overcome them? You can also speak more specifically from your inside on Meretz. You know, Yair Golan being today the only politician that speaks about the two-state solution, but in an unforeseeable future. I think it's also important to mention that, and you know, there is a very strong trauma, and we have to also understand and work with that. So over to you.
Yeah, I just would like to know that obviously I agree with the many things that Magen and Rabbi Leah just mentioned, but if to specify and to focus on the mission of the Israeli left, I think we should understand, first of all, the starting point, which is what actually happened in October the 7th, in the 7th of October, for the Israeli public notion, for the perception of the event. It wasn't just the Israeli right conception that were collapsed, that we understand it as leftists. This method, like this strategy of managing the conflict that has collapsed completely. This is security-wise. We also saw the state administration collapsing, and I think this is more profound and more kind of inner feeling for people, because what happened on October the 7th was first of all an enormous security failure, but it was a moment when every citizen in Israel felt completely unsafe, felt completely abandoned, felt stateless. So and this is equally important to mention. It was not just the deep feel of deep sense of insecurity, like physical insecurity, but the public of Israel felt that there was no staying behind, and that every element of the Israeli public administration has collapsed. And eventually, what happened is that civil society stepped into this vacuum. And I think until this day, still many parts of the Israeli society feel this way, feel that the government isn't working for them. And I think as an Hapoel fan and as a leftist in Israel, I must be optimistic. And I think this is the background that the left eventually should work on. This is, I think, the common background that we need to launch from, because what we see currently is a process of shock doctrine. When we are on ongoing war for the last year, and people under consistent bombarding in the north, consistent conflict in the south, many soldiers that have been killed in all fronts. So and people are in ongoing mourn, like ongoing trauma, basically. So what we've noticed over this year parallelly is a shock doctrine mechanism, that when people are bombed, when people are terrorized, when people are deeply traumatized, we see a government that utilize this situation in order to under the whistles of the missiles. The government is doing everything to promote and to implement Smotrich and Ben Gvir's vision for Israel. And for some of them, they even say it like outspokenly, this is a sign of redemption, right? So this is how we see Ben Gvir's appointment in the Israeli police from the chief of police, who is not just unsuitable, for the position, of course, but also quoted saying recently that he's discussed by gay couples to the policeman who is under his investigation because of a grenade that he threw directly on protesters during the protest against the judicial reform a year ago, and now have been promoted by Ben Gvir. And the Minister of Justice, Yair Levin, that relaunches his judicial reform outspokenly, minister that overriding the legal advisor and the Attorney General. I think we see alarming, ominous direction that we are stepping into, and therefore this is my greatest concern. And I think this is the biggest challenge for the Israeli left. I think the way basically the way basically of the Israeli left to get back eventually, hopefully, into power, assuming that we'll have, by the way, fair and free elections, assuming that the events that we saw in some military bases, when people just breached into military bases and we saw no arrest whatsoever, I'm mostly terrified about this one, because Israel, we know as a country how to defeat and how to manage outer security issues, but sometimes in this case I think we have major inner issues to confront. And I think this is the main goal, the ultimate mission for the Israeli left, to provide the security, the idea of security that many people in Israel, I think, are now absent of. They feel that they have no government that they can trust on. They feel that they have no people that they can actually trust on. And I think this is the main goal for the Israeli left. And I think it should be offered, I would say it as final words, it should be offered eventually, not just as a two-state solution, but correlatively and at the same time to offer a welfare state and social services which are such the current need for so many Israelis right now.
Thank you very much for this, Omer. And yeah, okay, so thank you for all the panelists for sharing the challenges and how you suggest to overcome them. Now it's time to hear from you, so I will let Jenny moderate. Please, questions and not declarations, because we want to allow as many people as possible to have their questions. And also please mention who the question is to, or if it's for all the panelists. Jenny?
Thank you, Matan. So I think before we go to the question, there was somebody in the chat who said that they wanted to speak about their feelings on 7th October from the perspective of being a Palestinian. So we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to share.
Ahlan?
Yes.
Do you want to unmute?
Yes. Hi all, and it's good to be with you. My experience of 7 October, and I'll be as honest, completely honest and transparent. I was visiting my family after 4 years, and I left the country on the 29th of September, 29, a week or 9 days before 7th of October. I stayed there for 10 days between Nablus and Ramallah and Jerusalem. I walked in the street. I've seen the level of poverty around. I've been the rise of kind of, it's not nationalism, I would say, there is no hope in peace between Palestinian people and all of this. And I have seen the worst in my life with young settlers standing here and there, intimidating everybody. I don't look Palestinian or anybody else. I am proud to be, I happen to be Palestinian and born as a Muslim as well, like you happen to be born whatever you are. Yet they didn't respect my seniority or anything meant to intimidate me, provoke me, and intimidate me. And they could have been my son or my grandson, whatever it is. And I left the country on the 29th, carrying in my heart something drastic is going to happen. So when it happened on the 7th of October, I wasn't surprised, but I was shocked because I do not agree with any religious state, any vision for religion, having a religious states. Those were the days gone with the wind. We are in a reality world now where we are all in a small village in this world, and we have to cooperate to survive, all of us acknowledging each other's rights, and our common humanity for me goes beyond that. What really came to me when I heard, I was lost. I had a chat with a very, very close person to my heart. And I heard her saying that, yes, it's about time. We cannot be, it's occupation, which absolutely fact, truth. But I really was afraid because I knew the consequences and the price is going to be so high. But what shocked me when I made my analysis between Hamas and between Netanyahu, to be honest, I found out, yes, it's horrible, but at least Hamas have brought the issue back into front line. The price is horrible, is unbelievable. But at the same time, the only winner in this war was Netanyahu, because he escaped himself from accountability to what he has been doing. Now, do I want this victory for this or that? No, I don't want a victory for anyone, especially for anyone who calls for going back to religious state and it's all mine. There is nothing all mine. The problem, I mean, the war, as you know, how many months and how many children dead, the infrastructure. And mind you, Israel is paying another price. It's not clean either, economy and all of these things. Yes, I feel sorry for both victims, but I still insist on enough of this, acknowledging, and the reason which brought me with you today, which takes me anywhere to talk exactly what I am talking, is because I care about our both children, our both Palestinian or a Jew. There isn't anything as a Jewish state. There is a state. There is a state which should be open to its citizens, to its people, as long as they are not burdened on the economy, on the whatever it is. But
Ahlam, just because we have to open also for questions. So
yes,
thank you for sharing this. But we really,
we need a joint vision. We need to sit and have a map between those who believe in peace and humanity and have a map for both people. We are the diaspora who are suffering in both cases because we live here, but our heart's there. Okay. And I would imagine one of the first steps for you in particular is to call for releasing, with the same breath we are calling for releasing of hostages, releasing of prisoners, and especially children. And you know about the reports about torture and raping and all of this. Let's try to restore our humanity.
Thank you, Ahlam.
Our conscience.
Thank you, Ahlam, for this question and comment. Thank you. Jenny?
If anyone from the panelists would like to comment on one Akram shared, and thank you, Akram.
Thank you.
I will say briefly that I think I'm going to put numbers on it, but I don't have anything to base those numbers on. But in Hebrew, there's a difference between Adam and Adama. And I think about 80% of the Israeli population is focused on human values. So even when the right is trying to sell the idea that settlements will provide security, I think still they're trying to say that what is important here is human life. It's not the land itself. And I think there's about 80% of the Israeli population that are focused on human values, among them security and others. And I think something similar can be said about the Palestinian society. There's the vast majority care about their children and living their lives and not about harming anyone else. And the sad thing is that we have something like 20 to 15% in both populations who sadly took over Gaza and took over all of the Israeli political sphere. And going forward, we need to find a way, and this is what I'm telling politicians here, we need to find a way to drive a wedge between the 15-20% lunatics who offer a vision to the future that involves an ongoing war for decades ahead, and the 80% of people who are willing to live together. They don't have to love each other, but they can definitely, they care about their children and their well-being more than another piece of land. And I think politicians here can do that. For example, the sanctions on settlements is exactly that kind of separation between the minority who cares more about land than human lives and the rest of Israeli society that I think cares more about human lives.
Thank you, Magen. I'm going to go to the next question. So, Ruvi?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks very much to all speakers. It was, as I said, really interesting. And what I want to do is actually build on the point I made in the chat about, in a way, about what is the frame or what is the scope, and it kind of, I think, partly also follows from Alam's comment. So I suppose the question for me is, how do kind of representatives of the Israeli left, how does the institutional Israeli left define that space? Does it define that space as including, as you were now, the Democrats, right? The Democratim, or does it include the voices within Palestinian Israeli communities, particularly Ode and Hadash more generally, and does it necessitate not just potentially create the possibility, but necessitates an explicit collaboration with voices within the Palestinian Israeli society that are similarly committed to a joint vision?
Is that for Omer?
I think perhaps primarily for, well, to some extent to Magen, I think as well, but primarily to Omer, like in terms of returning to the land, as you were.
Okay, so let's start with Omer.
Yeah, maybe I can answer it again from the position of former Meretz, today a Democratic National Board member. I think that Meretz, one of the reasons that I've been a part of Meretz is because it has always been, it was established as a co-Jewish Arab party, and I think the future of the Israeli left is the future of the Israeli Arabs who lives in Israel, this population that I think it's a crucial part, and it's like inseparable part of the Israeli society. And I think also for us, not just like in moral terms, but also in strategical and if we want to win as an opposition, as we saw in the recent government, the Lapid-Bennett government, that Meretz was part of this government, that we had an Arab minister, Isawi Fridge, a former minister. So and this government, I think, with Ram made such a history. Of course, we've been under consistent and very vicious attack from the right, but this is because they, quote unquote, they did their role as as opposition. It was very vicious and sometimes violent, but I wish that the opposition today would be more assertive against the uncomprehensible measures of the current government, really dangerous policies. And I think even for the future, so talking about the future, I think any future government, obviously after October the 7th, it would be more challenging. But I think eventually, yes, Ram, for example, and I think it's the best example that we have today. They will be a part of future government, and I think that the Arab citizens in Israel should be a part of the future governments. We definitely will face challenges regarding these issues, but we have so many challenges that we will need to face eventually, that I think we don't have the luxury to not face them. I mean, to not cooperate, to not to give up about for a future option to create again. And I think we must do it in the next government. We must create a coalition as broad as we can.
Thank you, Omer. So there was a question to Magen, which Magen answered in the chat. I'm just wondering if it's something you want to sort of comment. It was about the 80% stats.
And also, I would like to encourage everyone who came to listen today. I'm sure you all have personal experiences and questions, so please do. This is the time to ask questions in the chat, please.
So I wrote in the chat, but the 80% is a number I take from out of thin air. But the question I ask myself is, what is the maximum target audience for a peace message? And I think that's 80%. So 80% of people, I think with time and the right messaging, we can convince them. Some that they should want peace because it's the moral imperative. Some that they want peace because ultimately this is what provides security. So the different messaging to different targets. The fact that no one, oh, sorry, I don't want to say no one, okay? I take it that there are Ayman Udeh and others we can mention who are talking about peace. But in the Israeli-Jewish discussion, over the last 20 years, the word peace has become obsolete. And I think the Israeli left, and this is where I disagree a bit with Omer, I think the Israeli left, there's room for the Israeli center and center right. And it should be their, I think, role to fight against corruption and to support the judicial system. Obviously, the left is there as well. But the unique voice of the left is to keep the fire of diplomatic process and peace alive. And I think we haven't done that for the last 20 years, and we must do it for the next 20. Again, sorry, I'm a bit tired, so I'm saying things that directly. Sadly, if the occupation of Gaza continues for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we lose soldiers there every week, the popular opinion in Israel will change. This is similar to what happened in South Lebanon. And the vast majority of the Israeli population now is maybe still feeling the need. I agree that we are all experiencing trauma and pain, and we want to hit back. But after 2 or 3 or 4 years, if lives are still being lost in Gaza, then I think the popular opinion will change. And I hope we can make it change before those lives are lost. But it's not that there's a vast majority of Israelis who are willing to risk their lives to have settlements in Gaza now. I think it's the view of the lunatics on the far right. And even now, following the attack of October 7th, I think the popular opinion in Israel shifted to the right. But also, there's a lot of criticism of the settlers and settlements headed by Smotrich and Ben Gvir. So we can use this opportunity to actually paint them as the lunatics that they are, and grow the coalition of people who think a diplomatic process needs to at least be an option, if not the main focus. It must be an option, and not have a government who says it's not even an option.
Thank you, Magen. Rabbi Leah, I see you have something to say. And actually a question to you as well, because I know there's a lot you can tell us about that. More of sort of what are the things that we can do here in the UK as Israelis and Jews, who are liberal and progressive, but we're outside of Israel. So what we also can do to help.
Wonderful, thank you. That actually connects to something that I wanted to say while I put my hand up. So I think one of the big challenges of connecting to what Magen just talked about, of the left not really being a voice for the things we believe in Israel anymore, or at least not being seen as that for Jews from around the world, I think has also led to a really troubling phenomenon of left-wing Jews taking the liberty of opting out of Israel. Both left-wing Jews who were born and always lived outside of Israel, but also left-wing Jewish Israelis who are opting out of Israel, right? And one of my enormous fears of this current moment is that if we look at the statistics of the Jewish Agency keeps statistics on these things, of people opening Aliyah files. We're seeing the largest number of people opening Aliyah files. They tend to be from right-wing traditional Jewish communities. They are far outnumbered by left-wing Israelis leaving Israel. And I totally get it. I know it's tiring. I mean, you know, I've only lived sort of on and off for months at a time, or 1 year at a time in Israel. It's tiring to live in a country in turmoil, and sometimes we just want to live a good life. It's the same thing for diaspora Jews, right? It's tiring to deal with the ugly side of things. It's so much nicer to just study a bit of Talmud instead. But if we don't lean in, and if we are not the prophetic voices who say this is still worth fighting for, the right are going to win. And I think, and this is what we are seeing, and one of the big threats we're seeing right now, I know it seems minor in the big picture, is a wholesale right-wing takeover of what's known as the national institution, the most relevant of which is Keren Kayemet LiYisrael, because it's the single largest landowner in Israel and controls huge amount of land, much land where Bedouin live, land over the Green Line. It's a multi-billion shekel empire, and the right wing are completely set on taking it over. And actually, Jews around the world get a vote in it. There will be elections to the World Zionist Congress. It sounds like it's just a stupid game, but it's not. It's really billions of shekel that could be used for doing important work on peace and reconciliation and building strong neighborhoods, diverse neighborhoods, or it can be used to fund Hilltop Youth. It's literally that simple, and it is billions of shekels that are there for the taking, and the right wing aren't going to walk away. So if we don't lean in as left-wing Jews, so make sure you're on the mailing list either of Meretz UK or Tzenu UK, so we can keep you posted when you have to vote, because we can't leave it to the ultra-Orthodox when the rabbi says go and vote, they all vote. Unfortunately, in my constituency, I don't quite have that power. So there are lots of different things. Some seem really small, but if we don't keep at it, the right wing aren't willing to give up. They're feeling on top of the world right now.
Thank you. I think sadly we're running out of time. So we'll do one last question from Jonathan Levy.
And
Yeah.
if we can also, because we got a very practical answer from Leah, but I think you mentioned challenges and we have to we have to change reality. We have to stop the war, get the hostages back, go back to towards a diplomatic or political solution. Again, you mentioned this. What do you think people from here can do? So maybe we hear Omer and also Magen sharing those after Jonathan's questions.
Yeah, my question is linked to that as well. I guess my question is around where does your hope come from? Because it does feel like Palestinian society and Israeli and Jewish society are moving away from each other. There is a sense of victimhood on both sides, which is realistic and fair, but it is pulling each other away, and the societies are set up in a combative way against each other. And I struggle to see where the hope is for the future, to be honest.
Thank you. Who would like to start?
Maybe Omer and then Magen.
Okay, so I think I have a short answer because I don't think that I have the answer. That's the short and the long answer, but
No one does.
I think, yeah, exactly. It's not like a short, magical solution, obviously. So I think, but eventually we must keep trying. We must keep fighting. We must keep going and try to do whatever we can. As much as, I mean, as long as we are being in action, I think that's the most important thing. Having saying that, again, as an Hapoel Jerusalem fan, I think that's a good training for optimism. To be an optimist, like a very dedicated optimist. So I think this is important. But seriously now, I think again, when I see the opinion polls and I see the Israeli street, I was last week in Israel. So people are disappointed, people are distressed, people are exhausted, people have been protesting not just the last year and under bombarding and everything, but the two last years, because we had the demonstration against the judicial reform. But I think for the next election, at least for the next election, we still have hope. We still see the resistance and the protests again. We saw it after this evening with the very unfortunate and the horrible evening of when we heard about the 6 hostages that have been murdered by the Hamas and could have been rescued if Netanyahu signed the hostages deal. So, and you saw the massive protest. So I think the severe resistance is important. But having said that, I think that we as left And this is something that I don't hear very much. I do hear people speak about occupation. I think it's vital and important right now. I think we must speak about the occupation, because the two-state solution, it's like the proof that we've got, like since the 7th of October, it's basically we can't manage the conflict. Like we must go through and push through a two-state solution, but not just that. As I mentioned before, the Israeli left must talk about, must bring back social democratic approach. We are not aware of that, but the economical situation in Israel is a reason to another reason for severe concern. I think that people currently, the lack of teachers, the lack of social workers, the lack of psychiatrists in the most difficult times that Israel ever known. And this is something that the Israeli left has also need to offer eventually, a new deal, which will include not just a two-state solution and a conflict, like a solution for the conflict, but also the rebuild of the Israeli welfare state. And I think it's a crucial part that we as left we don't emphasize enough. And I think it's a crucial part for the Israeli left. And I am optimistic because we haven't tried that. I think Magen addressed before, and I think we haven't, the Israeli left haven't tried that. I haven't tried to offer this kind of a new deal for new audiences in the Israeli public, that I think now more than ever they urge for this kind of solution, for a comprehensive solution that will offer a welfare state.
Thank you, Omer. Magen?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief. Two things that three, sorry. So one, over the past year, I've made some Palestinian partners, and we're doing work together, and that gives me a lot of hope. That's one thing. The second thing is, I think we see both in, let's take the settler movement as an example. It is a small minority that has a outsized political leverage in Israel. In many ways, we need to mimic that movement. We need to think long-term, to get into, put boots on the ground in schools and public office, and do the hard work that they've done over 30 plus years, in order to have for the left to have an outsized power over Israeli politics. So I think that's something that we can do, and mimic that approach. I think is gives me hope. But I think the third thing that is most important is reality. Ultimately, there are 7 million Palestinians between the river and the sea. There are 7 million Jewish Israelis between the river and the sea. There is no other real future apart from learning how to live together and sharing the land. There is no other solution. The other solutions that Hamas is trying to sell the Palestinians, and that Ben Gvir is trying to sell the Jewish Israelis, is an illusion. And it would take 5 years or 10 or 50 years until that illusion crumbles, and we're left with the reality of those people who are living there and will continue to live there, and will someday in the future will learn to live together. So this is the only possible outcome. And the question now is, how many lives are going to be lost in that process? And what we're trying to do is to minimize the life lost. And that's, again, this is what me and my family felt so motivated after the personal tragedy. That's what we're trying to do, to minimize the life lost. But the reality is that ultimately there is only one solution.
Thank you, Magen. Rabbi Leah, any last words? before we wrap this? I know
I posted it in the chat. I'll just read it. That
Sure.
it'll be short. I'll end with a rabbinic response to the question of hope. One of my favorite teachings is, if you always assume the one sitting next to you is the Messiah waiting for some simple human kindness, you will soon come to weigh your words and watch your hands. And if the Messiah chooses not to be revealed in your time, it will not matter. So maybe it's the same with seeking peace, that each step we take in seeking peace is more important than actually seeing peace be achieved. And maybe our hope lies in those small encounters, in every step we take to seek peace, even if maybe we don't. We all pray that we will see it in our days, b'mehera v'yameinu, right? Both the Messiah and peace. It may not come, but maybe each step we can bring that world a bit closer.
Thank you. So I'm sorry that we don't have the time to address all the questions, but I think there were some also conversations in the chat, which is great. I think, Matan, I don't know if you agree with me, but what we've learned from this experience is that this should be the first, perhaps, of several conversations, because it seems like we have a lot to talk about, and many people who actually want to take part in these discussions. And as I said, when they started, perhaps feel kind of less alone and isolated, because it can be an isolating experience to be left-wing. So we will send a follow-up email with the recording of this session, and also some details about We Democracy and Meretz UK. So please do follow us both if you can, and we'll share different activities. And I guess it's another way to be involved and feel like you're actually doing something, being kind of more action driven.
And we share the concern of everyone living outside. What can we do to make a change? And we started speaking about it in this first meeting, but we will bring experts from different fields who give different answers to this big question, and we hope and we will continue this series of Smol Talks.
Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you to the panelists, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Laila tov. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.